Welcome to Moms and Mountains, a podcast for moms of all types, single, divorced, widowed, or married. We'll talk about our kids, life, marriages, family, ourselves, and our relationship with God. I want to empower all moms to overcome the greatest and smallest mountains of our lives through the love and power of Jesus Christ. And I want all moms to know that they are not alone in their struggles. Thanks for joining me, and let's get into the episode. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 1. I'm so glad you could join me. But first, I wanted to go back in my intro episode, so technically episode 0, where I just kind of spoke about what the podcast was about and what I was about a little bit. I wanted to go back and mention about what I had said about speaking your truth. I wanted to clarify this because I saw some things this week, kind of just like, Instagram, things like that. And I know a lot of people are talking about your truth. And I think there are different views on what that is. I do believe that there is only one truth regarding Jesus Christ and how to get to heaven. I believe Jesus died to save us from our sin, and I do believe he is the only way to get to heaven. So when I say speaking your truth, I'm not talking about everything. I believe there are truths that are true because they are true, and that we can't change that just because of our perspective. What I mean by speaking your truth, as I mentioned in the episode 0, is speaking about your life and your experiences and about what you believe and speaking from your heart. So I think I had said something along the lines of more women should be speaking their truth. And what I mean is that we need more voices and more women speaking their beliefs, their experiences, their life, speaking from their heart. And so I just kind of wanted to go back and just mention that before we got started today. So hopefully that kind of makes a little more sense. So today we're going to be talking about things you shouldn't feel guilty for, especially as a mom, right? Talking about mom guilt and all things associated. And I've actually made a list of different things that I found were common for me and maybe for others too. I've kind of noticed it in others and other moms. But first, before I do that, I want to talk about guilt in the Bible. I think that's really important to understand what exactly is guilt and what is its function. I believe that we have feelings and we have feelings, thoughts. Those things are all, God created us to feel different things for a reason. So I do believe that. So I don't think that we can say, oh, guilt is bad, sadness is bad, anger is bad. I don't believe that. I think these feelings all have a purpose. And so I wanted to go to the Bible to say, okay, what exactly is the purpose of guilt? So literally I went to Bible Gateway. I don't know if anyone knows that site. I've been using it for like 15 years. And I just searched the word guilt. And I went through all of the verses. Of course, there was like 70 something results, but I went through all of the verses and I just kind of read through and read the context. The first one I came across talked about being guilty was the story in Genesis, if you know it, of Joseph and his brothers. And Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery because of jealousy. And they sold him into slavery. And they lied to their father and said he was killed by an animal. If you know the story, you know that Joseph's father loved him so much, and he was the youngest, and he gave him a coat of many colors. So those brothers, they put animal blood all over the coat and tricked their father and said, oh, he died. But in fact, they had sold him into slavery. And then as the story progresses, Joseph goes into Egypt and he becomes like basically second to Pharaoh, which is a wild story. And he believed and he trusted God. And I think the story just, and of course, I don't believe this was a story. I believe this actually happened. But the story goes that, he was a believer. And so God placed him in a position of power And then ultimately the brothers come to Joseph, and there was a famine in the land, and the brothers come and they reconcile. And if you're interested, read it in Genesis. It's a great story. But going back to the guilt, so in Genesis 42:21, it says, "Then they said to one another, 'We are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore this distress has come upon us.'" So these are the brothers talking to each other. This is after they've sold Joseph into slavery. And they say to one another, "We are truly guilty because we saw that he was pleading with us and we didn't care. This is our distress, this is our guilt, and this is our burden." And they're bearing this burden of selling their brother into slavery. So as we talk about guilt, keep that one in mind. The next thing I came across was Leviticus. In Leviticus, it talks a lot about guilt. Actually, I noticed a lot of verses that popped up. And it talks about guilt in the context specifically of sinning against the Lord or doing something against him. So Leviticus 4:27-28. "If any one of the common people sins unintentionally by doing something against any of the commandments of the Lord in anything which ought to not be done, and is guilty, or if his sin which he has committed comes to his knowledge, then he shall bring this as an offering, a kid of the goats, a female without blemish, for his sin which he has committed." So if you know anything about the Old Testament, prior to Jesus coming to our earth and dying for us, there was required a sacrifice. Now, Jesus became the ultimate sacrifice, but there was required a sacrifice. So in this case, God said, "You need to bring a sacrifice and repent." But it specifically says that you are doing something against the commandment of the Lord. You're doing something you shouldn't be doing. Therefore, you are guilty because of that. And then once you bring that sacrifice, that is the sacrifice for your sin, and you repent of it. This is just an example of how guilt can play a role in helping us to recognize our sin. And I think that's really important. Just keep that in mind again. So the next one that I came across was Ezra 10:18-19, excuse me. "And among the sons of the priests who had taken pagan wives, the following were found of the sons of Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, and his brothers." There's a list of brothers. I'm not going to try and say all the names. "And they gave their promise that they would put away their wives, and being guilty, they presented a ram of the flock as their trespass offering." So guilt shed light on their sin. What was their sin? They took wives that were not believers in God at all. They did not believe in the one true God. What was the reason? Why did they take these wives? My guess is selfishness. So that was their sin. They were selfish, and they wanted what? Did they want sex? Were these women really, really good to look at, and that's what they wanted? Is there something else that they wanted from these wives? That is not love, right? And we know that. So there was guilt on their hearts for that. The next one I found was Hosea 10:1-2. It says, "Israel empties his vine. He brings forth fruit for himself according to the multitude of his fruit. He has increased the altars according to the bounty of his land. They have embellished his sacred pillars. Their heart is divided. Now they are held guilty. He will now break down their altars, and he will ruin their sacred pillars." So Israel was guilty of what? They were guilty because they were putting other gods before God. They were making these altars, and they were not to God. So they had other idols. I have one more, Matthew 12:1-7, and it's kind of long, but I thought this was a really good passage, so I wanted to read the whole thing to you. "At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and his disciples were hungry and began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. And when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, 'Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath.' But he said to them, 'Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, he and those who were with him? How he entered the house of God and ate the showbread, which was not lawful, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests? Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple are profane the Sabbath and are blameless. Yet I say to you, in this place there's one greater than the temple. But if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. So essentially, the disciples are hungry. It's the Sabbath. And so they pick some grain so they can eat it. And the Pharisees go, "Oh my gosh, your disciples are guilty. Oh, I'm condemning them. How could they do this?" And they're trying to go to Jesus and call them out. And Jesus said, "You're condemning the guiltless. God, you don't understand what this means. God desires mercy above sacrifice. God does not desire law and feelings of guilt to permeate us and to hold us back." In this situation, the disciples did nothing wrong. They were simply eating on the Sabbath. And because they physically picked the grain, that was a man-made law. And that was not something that God had created as law. If you see in the other examples I gave you, those were actually commandments from God. They were actually going against God. Joseph's brothers selling him into slavery. That is not love. That is selfishness. And, even the other examples I gave, selfish to, take a wife that was, not a believer, not equally yoked, as they say, right? And if you know what that means, it just means someone who's also a believer like you are. That was out of selfishness. So all of these things are going against God and his commandments. But in this last example, Jesus is like, how could you condemn these guys? They're just trying to eat something. And because of a man-made law, that's where you're placing their guilt. And you're saying they're blameless because of a man-made law. So it was not truly going against God. It was going against the human law. And therefore, they are guiltless. And he says it in the Bible. So clearly, this is Jesus's words. So keep this in mind, right? Like, why are you feeling guilty for the different things you do? And of course, in this podcast, I'm going to focus on moms, right? But this could really apply to any guilt that you actually feel. Take the time to assess that feeling and recognize it, because it can be a good tool to recognize our sin. But what is sin? I think that's the most important thing. Sin is turning from God, and that can look like a lot of different things, but sin is turning away from God. Guilt is not something to also hold on to. So even if you have a sin, let's say there is a sin that you've recognized in some part of your life, or as a mom, once you've repented from that sin, guilt is not something you want to hold on to, because Satan uses that as a tool to hold us back. And that is a really strong tool that he can use to keep us from our potential and to keep us divided from God. I think mom guilt is one of those tools. I really do. When people say mom guilt, they say, it's often used as a certain thing, right? Most of the time, there's no sin involved in mom guilt, is what I've gathered from the phrase. It's often a guilt that permeates everything. It lingers, it holds us back. We feel guilty for those smallest things. And most of the time, those aren't sinful. They are just, maybe they're cultural expectations. Maybe they're personal expectations. Maybe they're expectations that you have set from how you were raised and from your family, or books you've read, or people on YouTube and Instagram. And now you're feeling guilty because you're not doing something that you feel like you have to do. And I'm using air quotes. You feel like you have to do something and you're guilty because you didn't do it. God had no intention of guilt being used this way. He had the intention of guilt being used as a way, here's your sin, and then repent, and now let go. And that's all it's for. So with mom guilt, it can rob you of joy. It can affect time with children. It can affect your alone time, which is really important. And it's exhausting. I mean, it is so exhausting to be guilty all the time. The difference between healthy guilt and something, and healthy guilt is about something you did wrong. And there's a difference between that and guilt about not being perfect or living up to some sort of expectation you've made for yourself, or you're holding yourself to based on someone else's standards. So now that I've kind of gone through guilt in general. Hopefully that kind of sets a precedence for this, right? So I've made a list, like I said. I do have 10 things, but because this is my first podcast, like we're just getting into stuff. I'm going to try and not make it like an hour and a half long. So I split it up, and I think I'm going to just do the first 5 since I've already talked for quite a while. And so I'm going to go through these with you. One more thing I wanted to mention. Mom guilt, right? So we've talked about guilt in general, but mom guilt specifically. I kind of was wondering this, and I'll throw this out to you guys, but is it a built-in mechanism to overachieve and be perfect with our children, right? You feel that sense, but is it a built-in mechanism to protect them, right? So if you're feeling guilty, oh, did I, just for an example, and we'll talk more about specifics, but oh my goodness, did I like put her to bed on time, or him? Of course, I'm my daughter, so my daughter is on my mind, but did I put her to bed on time? Did I clean up like I should have? Did I teach her the right thing? Did we do too much of this today? It goes on and on and on, right? Is that a built-in mechanism to make sure that your child is well cared for? Is that something that can be a good thing? Because I don't want to have a mom that just sits there and goes, who cares? Who cares? I gave her some Cheerios this morning. She's good for the rest of the day. Oh my gosh, like that even like hurts my heart, right? I think that it can be a good and useful tool to protect our children. So, all right. So number one here is screen time. And this is such a big one because, oh my goodness, should we actually feel guilty for this one? Now, it can be really useful, and I understand it should be limited, right? You don't want your kids on there all the time. And I think one of the things with all of these different things I'm going to list is there is a balance to everything you do. And that's life, but that's also as a mom and parenting. Screen time can be really useful. Think about society and how it works now. Society requires both parents to work. And of course, if you're a single mom, you need to do the work of 2 people. How are you supposed to get anything done without using screen time at all? I work from home and I have a lot going on, and I'm sure everybody has a lot going on. But it can be really useful to take an hour or so and just watch a little something. You need time to decompress. So does your kid. I mean, yes, people will say, oh, well, they grow up in, times past without any screens and they were fine. I don't necessarily like that comparison because, gosh, we've had TVs since like the 1950s and 40s, right? That's when TV started being introduced. That was, I don't know, what was that, 70 years ago? Oh my gosh, which makes me feel really old. But if you're anywhere in like the millennial stage, you're like, oh yeah, 50s was 50 years ago, right? Did your brain stop at 2000 like mine did? But, that was a long time ago. I mean, that was when women weren't working. There was one parent who was home and you could do different activities, and society didn't require as much as it does now. That's something that you need to keep in mind is like society requires so much of you, and don't think of that and go, oh, I'm angry about it. Oh, that's horrible. Oh, well, I think it's one of those things that like, this is how society is. And, it not necessarily has good, it has bad, but it requires a lot from us. It demands a lot from us. And it's something we have to cope with. And I think using screen time is a way to cope with that. Not only if you're working, if you're going to school, if, you got stuff to do. A lot of us work from home now since COVID. If you got a meeting or whatever you've got, like, and you want your kid to just chill for about an hour, it's okay. I would say that's okay. The other thing is your own downtime. You need downtime too. And you need downtime. And now sometimes this can feel selfish, but you need downtime so you can better parent that kid. That's important. And I think when I started thinking, downtime for myself is selfish because I'm going to put my needs aside. When you put your own needs aside, you don't have downtime for yourself, that's going to affect your kid. So it actually isn't selfish at all, because taking care of yourself means you better parent and you better take care of your kid. So if that means you throw on YouTube for a little bit, you should put on a little, like, of course, safe stuff, right? um, throw that on for a little bit, let your kid kind of hang and chill. And, you know, think about this: when you come home from work and you've had a long day, you're like, all right, let's watch a little TV. Let's just zen out for a little bit. Let's watch a little something. And I think kids are the same, right? They need a little time to just relax. Um, that doesn't mean I'm saying like they're in front of the TV for 8 hours. I don't think that's a good idea either. Again, balance and everything. The last thing I'll say about this is it's important to pick carefully what your child is watching or doing. And that just applies to everything. There is a lot of educational stuff on YouTube. I use YouTube all the time. I actually, I didn't want to do this, but I purchased the premium version of YouTube so I could download and I don't have any ads. It's like $20 and it's kind of expensive. For me, that seems high, but I don't have TV. I just have internet. And the other thing I noticed is that the ads just pop up and you have no control over that. And I'd say be careful with that because, usually it's harmless, but sometimes like random things will pop up. And I just don't trust that. If you're trying to work on something and you're reading or you're on your computer and you're in the same room, you may not necessarily pick up on the ads right away. And you never know what could pop up. There's a lot of weird stuff going on YouTube. So I would just say just pick it carefully, but don't feel guilty about it. That's not something. Now, if you're letting your kid sit there for 8 hours a day and you're feeling convicted, then maybe that's an appropriate guilt to convict you and cause the repentance and then cause you to change that. But if you're letting your kid watch TV and then you're like feeling guilty because, oh, they watched like an hour or two today, but then they were outside the rest of the day. I mean, if you're balancing, are you trying to live up to another person's standard or a high standard that you've set that is kind of pointless? Or, just assess it on your own is what I'm saying. Okay, second one. This one is really big for those of us with toddlers, right? Not matching your child's energy 24/7. This is really big for me, and this is big for introverts or lower energy people. So I'm kind of a mix of an introvert and extrovert. I have limits. I always kind of assumed I was an extrovert because that's what everyone else told me. I'm definitely not an introvert. I like to be, talk to people. Obviously, I have a podcast, but I also like to talk to people face to face. But I have a mix of like, I need some downtime here and I need some, you know, lower energy time. My daughter is 2 and she has so much energy, especially when she was younger. I mean, you guys know this. I mean, I'm sure this energy doesn't really cap out until they're like 12. Even at that, they still have a lot of energy. So I realized I was trying to match her energy the entire day. And I was so tired. I was like trying to match the excitement level. And like she would be really excited and playing. I'd be like, oh, wow. Oh, that's great. And if you can like imagine, I'm sure you've done this. Can you imagine being that high energy all day? Now, maybe some of you can do it. Others of us are like, whoa, I need to just like let myself not be so excited. I've been excited for 6 hours today and I need to like just relax for a second. So I realized this wasn't sustainable. And this doesn't mean to ignore your kid. That doesn't mean you just like totally walk away and, but I don't need to keep up the excited energy and match the energy is kind of what I'm saying. So sometimes I have moments where I get excited. We have dance parties, we jump around, we scream a little bit. It's so fun. And there are other times that, I let her have those moments on her own. And I go, oh, that's great. Good job. Or I just give her a thumbs up and a big smile, and then I just kind of like hang out and watch her and let her do her thing. And she loves it. And I think it's good because it does teach them that they're not always going to get the same response from someone as they're giving. So they're going to be really excited. It doesn't mean that they're always going to get that excitement back, and that's okay. They can still be independent and have that feeling and that excitement on their own. Sometimes, and this kind of goes a little bit back to screen time, but sometimes I just want to sit on the couch, watch a little TV. So we put on some animal or some nature shows and we just decompress. Um, I used to have this thought process of I need to keep entertaining her the entire day until we go to bed. And I think realizing your limitations isn't you're realizing your limitations with this is very important. Um, After I get done eating, I'm kind of done. I'm like, I'm done. I just kind of want to chill. I've worked all day. I've done stuff around the house. I've done stuff outside of the house. I've done a lot and I've had her all day and I'm tired and I just want to sit down and relax after dinner. Side note, one of the ways I started relaxing a little more was by giving her a bath or a shower in the morning. And that helps. You don't have to do that obviously, but just thinking about ways that you can realize your limitations. But I used to think that I'd have to entertain her until she went to bed. Yeah, no, that is way too much work. So we just kind of relax and hang out together. And, I think as they get a little older, it seems to me that it's getting a little easier. She likes to watch a little TV at the end of the night with me. And, like I said, I keep it very, very, very PG. I don't know. I'm very, very cautious and everybody has their own meter. And I get that. Of course, you don't want anything too crazy and vulgar and violent, but I just like to watch animal and nature stuff with her. And then I use it as a teaching moment and we sit on the couch and I point out the different animals. And that's a very laid back way that I can interact with her and not be over the top with the crazy energy. Um, and I would speak to those who are divorced. This is specifically for those who are divorced. Are you trying to be the better parent, right? Am I hitting a nerve with that? Because you've got two different parents, you're not together, and there is a feeling of competition. Are you trying to compete? And if that's the case, are you trying to keep up that energy level 24/7 when you have your kid? Now, if you only have your kid maybe 50% of the time, maybe less, maybe that's sustainable for you. But if you have your kid more than 50% or even 50%, but if you have your kid more than that, my goodness, like take a breath and you know, uh, just know that you don't need to match that energy level to interact with your kid. You can interact at your own energy level, what is appropriate for you. And I think this part of this teaches kids to be self-sufficient as well. So, okay, let's move on to number 3. So, letting your child play independently. This kind of ties into not matching your kid's energy. And again, I felt like I had to give her attention, not only keep the energy up, but I had to give her attention 24/7. Now, listen, what I mean by attention, I am not saying do not pay attention to your child because of course that's not what we want, especially for toddlers. My goodness, you need to pay attention to them 24/7. But I think giving them attention is different than paying attention, right? When you're paying attention, you're going, oh, okay, like I know where she is at all times. I know what she's doing at all times. She is safe. She's not getting into anything. She's okay. I think giving attention is interacting with them on a certain level the entire time. So, I think sometimes this can play into what I was saying about being in a divorce situation. Are you trying to be the better parent? Are you competing internally with that other parent, whether it's in their face or not? Um, I think this also happens in regular families too. But I think single moms have had to have a reality check with this one. I think we've realized over time, if you haven't, you probably will, that it's not possible, that you can't maintain giving that much of yourself and that much attention to your kid every single minute of every single day. Um, and I think, you know, I guess I'm trying to think of an example of this, of giving the attention, but just I think interacting and playing with them. Now, sitting on the couch and reading a book or watching a nature show while they play with something else. You're paying attention, but you're not constantly giving that attention. You're letting them independently play. Is your kid having a dance party and you're just kind of sitting there reading a book and sharing them on, and that's okay. But again, I think single moms have had a reality check with this one and they realize, hey, I can't maintain this, but I still feel guilty about it. It's not possible to maintain the energy level and the attention of two people. You're one person. You need to remember that. And if you have more than one kid, my goodness, I can only imagine if you're by yourself. Like, I'm sure that you've already reached your limits. So here's the important part. Do you feel guilty for that? And should you feel guilty for that? I would say no. Um, Sometimes I think the other thing on the flip side of this is that it's good for your kid to play independently because sometimes they need to be alone with their thoughts and feelings. And yes, even at 5 years old, or younger. I think that's good for them. And again, I'm going to say not alone in the room, right? They shouldn't be alone in the room. And I think we all know that, right? If we're struggling with mom guilt, we all know that. So, um, it's good for them to experience those thoughts and feelings on their own. Um, I think that's the same with adults. So it's a good thing for them to learn at a young age. Okay, number 4, because I've already been talking quite a while. It's a good thing I'm splitting this up into 5, right? Um, Dressing your child a certain way. So the first thing I think of when I say this one is going to church or going out. So sometimes I dress my daughter in cute things, but other times I just let her be comfy. I think young kids don't really care and they want to play and they want to hang out and I don't think they really care. Sometimes they'll want to put a dress on if they're a girl. Boys probably don't care as much. But I used to get really embarrassed by like, oh, like what she's wearing and all that. And it kind of looks a little wild and crazy. The other thing is, especially when they're young, they grow out of clothes really fast. And so, like, some of her shirts won't fit her and some of her pants will. And then I've got stuff that doesn't match because the other stuff is in the laundry. And I'm not one of those parents that buys a bunch of clothes because, number one, I'm by myself and so I can't afford it. And two, like, they're going to grow out so quick, it's not even worth it. So, um, I used to feel like really embarrassed by that. And the other thing was, I always forget to pack extra clothes. I mean, I know that people say it all the time, pack extra clothes, pack extra clothes. I never do it. I still don't. It's been almost 2 years and I still don't do it. But here's the thing, like, your kids' clothes get dirty, they have stains on, like, uh, are you feeding, bathing, and taking care of your child? Are you meeting their needs emotionally and physically and spiritually, mentally? If you're doing that, does it matter truly what they look like? I mean, yeah, they got a stain on them. Now, if they've got the same clothes on for 2 days or 3 days or 4 days, now are you taking care of their needs? I would say you might not be. But if you're like, oh, they got a stain on it an hour ago and I didn't pack extra clothes and we're going out to dinner, come on. I mean, they're a kid. Like, I think this comes down to we all feel that our children are a reflection of ourselves. And so I would ask you this. Are you worried about the image that you are portraying to others, versus am I taking care of my child? Those are two different things that are really important. So I would say that in a lot of cases, when it comes to mom guilt, specifically what we call mom guilt, you're probably more worried about the image that you're portraying to others. Um, you know, it makes me think of being a single mom, especially in a Christian setting. Not necessarily just dressing my child, but I think it comes down to, she's a reflection of me. And if I am portraying that I can't handle this, are people thinking that I can't handle it? Are they thinking that I'm struggling because it's just me? Especially in a Christian setting, like I don't have a ring on and I have a daughter. Like, do they think that I can handle it by myself? And I think those thoughts come up when I think about the way I'm dressing her. Um, you know, for example, one time my daughter had just started walking and she forgot her shoes in the car. And, I was like, wow, well, now what? And I figured she wouldn't want to walk. I figured she'd want me to carry her. Yeah, of course she wanted to walk. right? She forgot her shoes and she was wanting to walk. I was out with some friends and family, and she wanted to walk on the sidewalk. And one lady gave me the most mean mug look and was like, "Oh, she doesn't have shoes on." And I was watching where she was stepping, and I don't recommend it, right? Because kids, especially as they get older, they run and you can't really watch where they step. But man, she would not let me hold her. And I was waiting for someone to come out of a building, and I'm like, oh no, what do I do? So I just let her walk a little bit. And I'm like, I felt so guilty after that. I felt so incredibly guilty. And I was like, you know what? She always has shoes. It's literally one time for 10 minutes, and that's the picture that that woman saw. She doesn't know the rest of that kid's life. So I think people are quick to judge, but don't take that judgment on yourself and put it on yourself. Don't internalize that, right? Like, assess your situation on your own. You know best. Um Number 5, taking something away that they want, or not doing something that they want. So especially when they're younger, this is upsetting to them, right? You know, they want to hold something that they can't have. For example, my biggest thing is the phone. Oh my gosh, she is obsessed with my phone, and you know, and if it's not harmful, right? Now, if it's harmful, like, you shouldn't feel guilty, period, right? Just take that thing and run, like, get it out of her hands or his hands, right? Of course. But even if it's not harmful, I still think you should feel guilty depending on the situation, right? So if she's playing with a toy or he's playing with a toy, you know, why would you take it? I think you need to look at why you're taking it. Are you taking it because of your own selfishness? I mean, I don't know how many people are taking toys and that aren't harmful and from their kid, unless they're trying to get them to go do a bath or brush their teeth. Like, look at your intention, right? Um, with my daughter, she loves my phone. Oh my goodness. And I take the phone and she cries. Not always, but I think she's learning, right? But um, it, you know, it's okay to take it, right? Like, I don't want her on my phone all day. Like, so I take it from her and then we go try and find something else to play with. And she just learns that, like, she can't have everything that she wants all the time. Another example is in doing something that they want, right? My daughter wants to lay down so she can jump on top of me. She likes to jump on my stomach. And honestly, I don't always want to do this. Like, there are times I definitely don't want to do this. So, I feel guilty sometimes, but most of the time, my daughter, she'll move on, she'll find something different. I think most toddlers are that way. And I think it's a good lesson that they don't get everything that they want. And it can just be a situation where they want to do something and you don't really want to do it. And that's okay. I mean, look at the situation. Like, for example, were you outside for 3 hours this morning and now they want to go outside right away again? If you don't want to go and you want to try and see if they'll color, see if they'll color. And if they're crying, they want to go outside and you were just outside for 3 hours, just say, look, depending on the age, you can explain it to them. If they're younger, you can try and explain a little bit. It's never too early to explain, right? I feel like there's never too early. But do you necessarily have to do that because they want to do it? I don't think so. And I don't think you should feel guilty for that. They need to learn that they can't just control everything and get everything they want because they're upset. And I think that's okay. So, okay, so that was my 5 things. I'm glad that I'm splitting it up because I think I'm almost at 40 minutes here. I've been talking a lot, but I wanted to really cover the intro part of the guilt. I felt like that was really important. So I'll leave it at that. And I've got the rest of the 10 things for the next episode. I really hope you enjoyed this, and I hope that it kind of opens you up to thinking about things in a different way, and it doesn't make you feel too alone. Um, I will let you know that we have an Instagram. It's called Moms and Mountains 22, and it's for the podcast, but I do post a lot of different things on there, and I really want to start a conversation. So comment on there. You can send me messages. You can, whatever you want to do. I try to post different things, sometimes about the podcast, sometimes about like different things that I take away from my prayer and my Bible study and just life in general. Or I'll repost things that I find on different accounts. So I really encourage you to join the conversation. I'll give updates on when the podcasts go live. So it's good to follow. Again, it's Moms and Mountains 22. So moms with an S, and it's spelled out, and mountains, plural, so with an S, 22. The other thing I'll ask is that if you like this, it's brand new podcast, right? So I'm kind of like in the Netherlands of Apple Podcasts and Instagram because I'm like a no one right now. So if you've listened to this and you like it, go ahead and rate it. I would really appreciate it because rating and writing a review, it's the way that Apple Podcasts will start recommending to other people. And then it'll get the word out. And then the same, following the Instagram, it helps boost those algorithms with which I can't figure out those algorithms. So, I know that following helps, that commenting and liking helps. I know that much, right? But yeah, if you enjoy this, go ahead and rate it. Go ahead and write a review. And, if you want to send me a message on Instagram, if you didn't like something, tell me. That's totally fine. I'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day. And I should be posting the next episode in probably about 2 weeks or so, maybe sooner. So stay tuned. I will let you know on the Instagram, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye for now.